Welcome to Fast Pace, the new growth, leadership and management podcast featuring Josh Phegan and Dean Mackie. We wanted to peel back the layers on what happens in the world of fast-paced real estate agencies, from new leadership models to the management challenges we all face each day. This is about a new era in the estate agency sector. Rapid changes to business models, service lines, remuneration and growth present the greatest opportunities that we've ever seen. Sit back, get inspired, grow your skills and reimagine what's possible with Fast Pace. Every Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Josh Phegan Digital. Property management is a really important part of any business. As a business owner, you're in a position that naturally it helps you not only generate consistent recurring revenue, it's also the saleable value of the business. It does a whole range of things in terms of adjacents, but also too, it allows you to actually build a really big sales business around the principal place of residence of where your landlords actually live and helping landlords to aspirationally both buy and sell residential property that naturally they can add to their portfolio over a period of time. Dean, the industry is under a bit of fire. We've seen some interesting conversations from the AFR coming out saying up to 10% more properties are actually available for sale in the market right now that were previously an investment property compared to the 5-year average. We've got a position that landlords are saying, hang on a second, if there's rent caps, as there are in some states and territories in Australia, why do my interest rates keep on going up? And I just can't afford to hold the property over that period of time. But yet, last month alone, 10% more loans were written in Australia to investors than there were this time last year, which tells me that there are investors that are still buying. So naturally, it's about understanding what actually is the future of property management. Where are the big opportunities sitting in here that a lot of people just miss? And is it actually a conversation where the centralisation of services, where you start to think differently about the power of technology, or are we waiting way too much for AI to apparently do the heavy lifting to actually get our businesses productive and fit into the future? What a topic, man. I can't wait to see you fire up on this. What are some of your thoughts about the future of property management?
Oh, mate, look, I think this whole space has been crying out for, reimagination for quite some time.
Yeah.
And I think that if I go back 10 years ago, some of the stuff that we were talking about and the things that we were imagining for our space, really, it was a bit of a pipe dream, but it was really about saying, how do we get our property management teams, for example, highly engaged with investors and not just be dealing with reactive stuff, be dealing with proactive, how do we help an investor, make more money out of their existing property, buy additional ones, do all sorts of things because if you own an investment property, typically a lot of people only own one investment property. But if you're lucky to have 2 or 3, it's all part of people's dreams and aspirations around how to build wealth for their family, right? And property is an intrinsic part of that. So I think the whole industry is being sort of caught in this dark ages type model of having people dealing with process and hiding behind process a little bit. And the tenant experience, for example, has been typically quite terrible. If you were to sort of think about what a tenant experience is, they're just struggling to get hold of a property manager and who's buried deep in 100 different types of tasks, with email being buried somewhere down there, and they might get to it at some point, right? So I'm not saying that's everywhere, but typically you will hear people say those sorts of things, right? So I look at it and go, well, at the heart of it, it's sure, we as business owners have an asset, and yes, it generates sales. But at the heart of it, I look at it and say, how do we actually give a tenant and a landlord a completely better experience than where they're at the moment? And I think it starts with us thinking differently around it. And you mentioned AI. AI is very, very useful in this place if you know how to use it. So we've sort of got really excited around the technological changes that have been happening. And this year we've been doing a lot of work in this area. So it's a good time to talk about it. But what I've learned is it's going to be to get it right for the future, which is your question, it's going to be how do you employ and combine the right mix of people with, your digital assets and understanding what those digital assets will do. But one won't do it without the other. And it's, you talked about AI a moment ago. Unless you've really mapped out what you want the AI to do, it can't really do much for you anyway, right? So you've got to get really clear about what is your objective and what are you trying to do. And so, we as business owners have got a lot of pressure on margin in this space. Like over the last 12, 18 months, 2 years, property managers' salaries have gone up quite a lot, and typically fees have also gone down. So we've got this real compression. So while it's an asset, you still got to make money out of this thing. Otherwise, you got to keep putting cash into it, right?
It burns.
And for a lot of people, if you don't have a couple of hundred, 200-300 managements, you're probably losing money on that asset. So, first you got to build a bit of scale, and then you've got to build a bit of efficiency, and you've got to make sure that you're actually ahead of the curve on what the customer is going to expect going forward. So how do you help a landlord stay ahead of the curve and keep making good money? And how do you give the tenant a better experience? And so what we've decided to do is we've gone through and we've mapped every single part of the process, and we decided to start with tenants. And we actually have now realised, and we've put a concierge team together that now handle all of our tenant inquiries. They don't go through, when I say all, parts of our business have been on trial on this. We're about to roll it out across the organisation, but it's worked incredibly well, where a tenant can jump in and with under 4 rings, they can actually get somebody, right? And somebody's going to respond to them. And it's not necessarily the property manager anymore. It's a tenant concierge. So their job is to give a fantastic experience to the tenant. They help onboard the tenants. They help deal with maintenance. They help deal with all those sorts of things. The reason why we're doing it through a centralised concierge is because, firstly, you can actually get concierge people who love giving service at a much lower rate than you can a senior property manager. So that's the first thing. So we're dealing with wage
disparity.
Wage disparity, number one. Getting someone whose love is delivering an experience, but importantly, solving this issue with the tenant. So in the process of remapping all of those processes, we now know that what we need to do to use AI to actually collapse a lot of even that. So we still want human handoff, but there are
the moments that matter.
Yeah, exactly, for the moments that matter, because there are significant parts of the process that a person doesn't add any value to. They're really just shifting from one part of the process to the next. And so for a tenant should be able to almost self-serve for maintenance, for example, where they can actually go in and log maintenance itself. The AI can pick it up, can understand within certain parameters on being able to allocate, define that job, and also be able to use its intelligence to allocate work to a tradie, be able to book it with the tradie, handle the invoicing with the tradie, and so on. So you can actually handle that whole process within reason, entirely by AI if you map the processes correctly and you understand what you're doing. But I've learned, unless you do it manually first and nail it, you can't really use the AI to collapse the manual process, right? But you have to sort of go through an evolution, and which we're working through, and what we're learning is that it means that we can take a lot of the tasks, and we've already proven it, that we can take a lot of those tasks off our property managers, and it means that we can shift the role of a property manager. We're now calling them investment managers because they're no longer dealing with property, and they're more so dealing with the customer experience around. And so now my property managers, if you want to call it that, their job is to completely focus on our investor and Mr. Investor around making sure they've got a great experience, and also understanding what their investment goals are and all the other stuff that gets attached to that. So for us, I think that's a future state that we're looking at around how do we employ the best technology and digital applications that are available today, and how do we re-engineer the workforce itself? Because there's no point just overlaying your tech in and then not re-engineering your team. If your people are still doing the same old, then it doesn't do anything. But it does require a lot of courage, because there's going to be people in your team that potentially
are wedded to previous ways.
Well, they're actually wedded to the process. They're actually that way inclined. They actually don't want to talk to people that much, right? And there's a lot of property managers who are quite happy that they're really good at the process. But they might avoid the phone calls, the proactive phone calls. I mean, so I look at it and I think to myself, if you take the right mix of your people and digital and technology, you can improve all your operational processes. You can really get clear about how and where you want your customer interactions to occur and how you want them to happen. It actually allows you to really change how you do your marketing. In fact, as well, there's a lot of changes in this space, both in sales and investment management, around how we can market landlords' properties a lot better, and how we can also then start thinking, once you've got things into a proper sort of, it's almost like it's not a sales funnel, but it's a digital ecosystem. You can start then also thinking seriously about other revenue streams that you can actually be offering your customer that you don't offer them at the moment. So I sort of see it as an opportunity to get scale. I think you need scale in this game going forward. I think you need to be able to, that scale, if I didn't have scale, I wouldn't be able to do the things I'm doing at the moment. So if I had 200 or 300 managements, there's no hope I can think about
invest ahead of the curve.
I can't invest ahead of the curve. So I think I'm sensing that it's scale, it's investment ahead of the curve, it's being smarter, using technology to really go, how do I use AI and automation to deal with things like documents and contracts and all that stuff. And then you start thinking about what are the apps and the websites that you can make accessible to a tenant or a landlord for them to have easy access for online bookings, for communication, and all sorts of stuff, right? So, mate, this is a really interesting topic, but I don't think it's just it's an easy fix. I think that you've got to be committed to saying, how do I build a investment management business of the future? And it's going to look very different to what it has looked like in the past.
So, Dean, a couple of observations just from the outside. First key thing, one thing I've seen inside of your business is less about the number of properties that are managed and more about what's the total revenue that they're managing per property manager. Other things that I've noticed across industry is that most property management businesses, the landlord is allocated a property manager, but they're not actually allocated a BDM. So the property manager tends to look around like arrears, routines, maintenance, all of those items, but they don't really look after growth. And the BDM looks after growth, but they're not actually allocated against each landlord. Great relationships can actually be built that way.
Yeah, so it's symbiotic, right? And so if you've got your investment managers who have equal responsibility for growth of their portfolio, then you get alignment.
And then the next conversation is that for multi-landlords, which is what I call a high-risk client, let's make sure that each of those multi-landlords also have a relationship with the director. So as being an investor over the last 21 years, I've outlived a lot of property managers inside of these businesses that look after my investment properties, but yet I've still got a relationship with the director or maybe the BDM. And so that way, when someone leaves, we don't lose the whole relationship in one go. The other thing, if I have a look at industry training...
Josh, just jumping in on that, I mean, that was a big reason why we decided to shift to what we're doing as well, is that because of the industry has had a lot of turnover, there's a lot of risk associated with your portfolio when you've got property managers moving for 5 or 10 grand. And with the cost of living, people do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes you just get blindsided by the fact that you don't realise, it's pretty expensive to live in a place like Sydney and some of the capital cities around the country. And you mentioned before, rents are going up and everything else. So it's pretty tough, so I get people will leave. So how do you put in place strategies to mitigate that and mitigate the risk of the turnover associated and still be able to give someone a consistent experience?
So then I go and have a look at how can you earn more income? So I say, okay, great, you can earn more income by doing a couple of things. One, increase your rents, make sure that you're increasing fee, making sure you're charging all the additional ancillaries. I'm also prepared to pay you a percentage if you can actually get a landlord to buy another investment property, so maybe 5% of the sales fee. I'm also in a position that I'm happy to be able to give you some income if you're able to get a landlord to sell an existing principal place of residence. So we start thinking about all these other ways to go to produce income rather than just this is my wage. And then the final thought is that when I sort of sit on the edge, and I don't do a lot of it, but I kind of watch over time, most of the industry training is about stuff like compliance, some stuff about legislation. Often I'll hear some things about like how to have confronting conversations, and in a lot of businesses about stuff about mental health. But yet I'm struggling to find the training about how to do a great routine, or how to actually do arrears, or how to actually have a onboarding of a landlord, or how to actually move a landlord to a different portfolio. And if you have a look at it, there's about 14 different buckets that we kind of sit in that space. And I just want us to get back to being really good at doing the core of the job. And if you do that really well and the training focuses on that, and sure, there's time for the other stuff, but let's get the core so that someone actually knows how to get a rent increase and how to actually make sure that they can turn a lot of opportunity out of the basics of what we do inside of running a great property management service.